Now, for the record, I don't believe in ghosts, but if you told me that India during World War II was a ghost, I definitely wouldn't second guess you. But why is that? Ironically enough, India's contributions to World War II were absolutely unmatched. By the end of the war, they had the largest volunteer army in history of over 2.5 million men, and as Field Marshal Claude Auchinleck, Commander-in-Chief of the Indian Army, said, Britain couldn't have come through both world wars if they hadn't had the Indian Army. And if that wasn't impressive enough, even Winston Churchill paid tribute to the, I quote, the unsurpassed bravery of Indian soldiers and officers, unquote. Now, you know when Churchill praises Indians, he must truly mean it, seeing how he allegedly personally resented their struggle with the Bengal famine and especially just Gandhi himself. Anyways, India is a special country with special people and a very special history. India throughout history has had a lot of wealth, and around the year 1700, that wealth almost amounted to 20% of the world's GDP. And wealth like that brings unwanted foreign eyes. But it's people like Gandhi and Subhash Bose who fought for the Indian people in the 20th century and made India what it is today. Now, both of these men had more or less the same goal, but a very, very different path to achieving it. Gandhi chose and took the pacifist way with his satyagraha philosophy, where he would pose a non-violent resistance to an evil. Basically, by refusing to submit to the wrong or to cooperate with it in any way, the satyagrahi asserts that truth. Now, this is a very, very scary and tight path to take, because if you think of it, this whole philosophy relies more upon the evil than the actual resistor. You're basically giving yourself up and are at their mercy. It's basically the evil's dream. Imagine the Jewish people practicing this during the Nazi regime. Well, I'm sure atrocities would be committed. But actually think of it, in this hypothetical situation, appeasement and everything else which accumulated towards the Second World War maybe wouldn't have happened if they thoroughly and explicitly could see the drawing on the wall that there was no peace to be had. Well, that's just a what if, but what's not a what if is how effective this strategy really was, and will hopefully continue to be in the future. This, along many other things, made Gandhi the legend he is today. Now, that was Gandhi's approach on how to resist oppression. How was Subhash Bose's? Well, he took a very different path to say the least. He joined arms with the Axis powers and took control of the fascist Japanese-made INA, Indian National Army, to save India from its brutal captors, while ironically himself being a socialist sympathizer. The level of irony here is truly on another level, but you can't argue he didn't truly know who he was allying with. Anyways, his famous slogan was, "You give me blood, I'll give you freedom." So yeah, just two very determined people with a common goal and a very different path to get there. Well, freedom came in 1947 with the partition of India, which saw British India divided into two independent dominions, Hindu-majority India and Muslim-majority Pakistan. This abrupt leave and change of power would be a root for many future conflicts between the two countries, and those conflicts started right away, with the displacement of 10 to 20 million people on religious lines, resulting in a very hostile environment where 200,000 to 2 million people died. A conflict that still to this day strains Indo-Pakistani relations. India was a very hostile place at the time, which led to Gandhi's inevitable assassination in 1948 by a Hindu nationalist who, funny enough, blamed Gandhi for the violence. India's history the next few decades was sadly just that of a country desperately trying to find its balance. In the 50s and 60s, they understandably had failed to educate the citizenry, with a mere 18% of its population being classed as literate, and even more specifically, 85% of all Indian women staying illiterate. But not all was bad. Nehru, who was kind of like Gandhi's political heir, was quite the leader, and through his political, economic, and social reforms, he made horrible a little less horrible. He promoted a secular nation-state and a multi-party democracy, and interestingly enough, during the Cold War, Nehru played a leading role in establishing the non-aligned movement. That's all nice, but there was still one little problem of decolonization in India. It was not yet fully achieved because the Portuguese and French still had some minor holdings in India. The Portuguese had Goa, and the French had some minor holdings, most notably Pondicherry. Now, Pondicherry was given independence in 1954 and fully unified with India in 1961, while Goa and the Portuguese, on the other hand, was a lot more of a hassle. President Nehru, in the same year as the unification of Pondicherry, so 1961, resorted to taking Goa by force after first trying to use public pressure, which failed because Portuguese dictator Salazar wasn't just going to let go of his colonial holdings. What happened next was, for the Portuguese, the invasion of Goa, and for the Indians, the liberation of Goa. A swift 36-hour campaign and Goa was once again Indian. Nehru died just 3 years later in 1964 and was replaced by his daughter and a massive conflict, the Indo-Pakistani War of 1971, which ultimately led to the creation of Bangladesh and a massive victory for Indira Gandhi. This war stripped Pakistan of more than half of its population and solidified India's regional power by not bowing down to the United States and even joining closer to the Soviet Union, which would ultimately become a bit of a trend in the coming decades. It's a good geography and very capable leaders which made India the superpower it almost is today.